One January morning in 2018 at around 9:45, a debate began in the States Assembly into changes to Jersey's election law. About a dozen members spoke, the vote was unanimous, it was all over by 10:10 and little or no mention of it in the press. But the decision that day has far-reaching implications for democracy in Jersey and issues another wake-up call.
That January debate authorised the invitation of a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association election observers mission to Jersey to examine our general election from nominations to polling day, just as they do all around the world.
The electoral observers were here to see how we fulfil our obligations to the international standards that Jersey is signed up to, from the European Convention to the Venice Commission to the United Nations, all of which set international standards for how a free and fair election is run. It's important because it's a human rights issue, your right to a vote which carries the same weight and power as everybody else's.
Jersey can't pick and choose from its obligations. The island prides itself on its compliance with international financial regulations, but surely our compliance with human rights legislation should be a higher concern.
Good news, the observers found that our elections were well executed, professionally and impartially run, but they also found
an electoral system which remained overly complicated and cumbersome, constituency boundaries not drawn in line with international standards. Areas of concern include the number of uncontested elections, disparity in the equality of the vote across districts and parishes, and low voter turnout.
All of which they say undermines the principle that elections in Jersey are fully genuine.
That's the wake-up call. That's what my committee, Privileges and Procedures, needs urgently to address. And that's why Karina, Scott and I have since June last year been working on all 18 recommendations of the electoral observers, starting with how the State of Jersey is constituted to ensure that the next general election in Jersey in 2022 is fully genuine and meets international standards, giving every islander an equal vote.
Here's what we need to aim for. Each elector having the same number of votes. Each vote holding the same value. Constituencies of equal size in terms of population. A contest for each seat so that every candidate faces an election, leading to greater voter participation.
Could we make the figures work with the constables?
Mathematically, no, because of the population distribution. If you take St Mary's, for example, you have a population of 1,900.
The Constable of St Helier represents a population of 36,000, but their weight in the Assembly is the same. So potentially you have one constable which has 20 times the population of another constable, but the weight represents exactly the same of their vote in this Assembly.
It's not just about the numbers. In a modern democracy, every member should be specifically and directly elected to the Parliament. Of course, we know this is not the case with the constables, who we elect to run their parishes and by virtue of their office become members of the Assembly.
For that reason, we have to recommend that the constables are no longer members of the Assembly by virtue of that office. There is, of course, nothing preventing them from seeking election to the States in addition to being constables, if that is their wish.
The concern has always been that without their seat in the Assembly, the constables are diminished and the parish system we cherish withers and dies. But democracy as a whole in Jersey is in poor health already. The answer surely is for positive action, strengthen the role of the constable, reinvigorate and redefine the relevance of parish governance. So what's the answer?
So the answer would be to look at completely devising different districts. If we're looking at voter equality and voter equity, which means each voter having the same number of votes but also each vote carrying the same weight, as in the same representation, then there needs to be an amalgamation, a restructuring of the whole system.
Redrawing the borders?
Yeah.
Redrawing constituency boundaries is all about the numbers and has been floated before, of course, but without success. Perhaps because twinning St Bullards with, say, St Peter or St Saviour with Trinity, one can envisage the larger parish overwhelming its twin. We think we've found a better way, keeping things more local with 9 constituencies. We're looking for each district to be around the 11,500 mark in terms of population. St Juan, St Mary and St Peter coming together adds up to a population of 11,760, a negligible 3% departure from the optimum.
St Juan, St Mary and St Peter don't cease to be individual parishes. Of course they don't. It's just that for the purposes of an election, they come together every 4 years to form a district, and instead of voting for one deputy each, they combine and vote for 5.
St Brelade becomes its own constituency with 11,400, bang on target. St John, Trinity and St Lawrence add up to 12,300. Now that's a 7% variance, but well within Venice Commission rules, encouraging a 10% or up to 15% in exceptional circumstances variance. In St Helier, by the old 3 and 4 district doing a Vantane swap with the old St Helier number 2, and the district formerly known as St Helier number 1 staying as it is, we stay on target, just, with a newly named St Helier Central being a little top-heavy with a 13% variance. We'd rename its neighbours St Helier North and St Helier South. St Clement has a population sufficient to be its own constituency, like St Brelade. It's over-represented now by 13%, but with the Samaray Nursery site coming online, that figure will reduce to 10% or under. Now it gets a little bit more tricky. St Saviour on its own is well over. St Martin and Grouville combined, well under.
The top of Queen's Valley Reservoir here is where the 3 parishes of St Saviour, St Martin and Grouville converge, with the Vantane sous le Houg of St Saviour above my right shoulder, St Martin's above my left, and Grouville stretching out in front. Now, we could make the figures work numerically perfectly if the Vantane of sous le Houg and one other from St Saviour, maybe Montfort or Les Pignots, voted with St Martin and Grouville. But that's maybe too radical for today's politicians. I'm not sure I'll get that through, but it's something for the future, maybe for the Boundaries Commission to take a look at in consultation with and with the permission of the residents affected.
In the meantime, we propose this compromise. We give an extra representative to St Saviour, so a total of 6. And we leave St Martin and Grouville with 5, like all the other districts bar St Saviour. That gives us an assembly of 46 members, 3 fewer than currently.
In bending the rules for St Saviour, St Martin and Grouville, are we unpicking our ideal to achieve voter equity and voter equality?
Not really. Voter equity means that every single voter on the island would have the same number of votes. The only instance where this wouldn't apply would be St Saviour's, which would gain an extra vote. But what this means is that we would ensure better voter equality, which is the number of people that are represented by each assembly representative.
And St Martin and Grouville being over-represented?
It's much better than being underrepresented.
By now you would have realised in our proposals we're saying goodbye to the senators. From the Clothier report to the Electoral Observers report to many others, we've had one consistent message. Simplify your system, have one category of states member. It's going to happen one day, why not now? That's certainly the mood we've been getting from the politicians we've been talking to. Of course, they're the ones that need to pass it through this assembly. And if history has shown us anything, it's that electoral change in this assembly is 99% of the time resisted.
Achieving voter equity, voter equality is important in itself, but does it pay dividends in other areas?
Yes, at a stroke we could eliminate uncontested elections.
Because we've got every seat as a multi-seat constituency, which traditionally is much more inviting for a candidate to stand for election in.
No one's denying that these measures are radical. They're a shock to the system. And people say, who are the electoral observers to tell us what to do with our system? But their focus is not on politicians, but on the voter, on giving the voter fair votes, equal votes. And that's something to strive for, isn't it? For the first time in Jersey elections, everybody's vote will count the same. And I know some voters know that their vote doesn't count as much as their neighbour. And that's a disincentive to come out and vote, to participate in politics. And we need, desperately in Jersey, more people to take part in our elections. So it would be a shame, wouldn't it, to let the sun go down on a real opportunity to reinvigorate our election process, to make it fairer, to make it better. That's the opportunity. That's the prize.